the approach. You people in California are so lucky. You're so spoiled with all the good food you have. It's such a pleasure to come out from the East Coast and see the foods in the markets and the stores and everywhere here. You're so lucky.
We'll take that as a compliment. Here's a question from Hassam, who says, does it make a difference if you consume 1,000 calories from a candy bar than from a natural food? I think we should educate our children not about calories, but about processed foods, because no matter how many calories you consume from natural food, your brain is wired to stop at a certain point. But if you consume processed foods, your brain is not wired in such a way to understand when to stop eating the processed foods.
Oh, I like that. That's really a nice way to put it. There are some people, David Kessler, for example, the former head of the FDA who lives out here,
right,
has a book, The End of Overeating, in which he argues exactly that point, that food companies deliberately manipulate the ingredients in processed foods in order to make you want more and more and more of them, whereas the foods that come from nature didn't do that. So avoiding processed foods is a really good way to help manage your weight.
All right. Casey in Burlingame. Hi, you're on Forum.
Yeah, I had a question about Professor Lussig's video about how sugars are much more detrimental to the body than other calories, and they're not processed in the same way. They're processed by the liver and so on. And I wanted to make a quick point about government and causing problems in food. The unintended consequences of the Bloomberg decision is that diet sodas are still able to be consumed in large amounts, and there could be an argument made that those are much more detrimental even than sugar ones, as far as cancer and diabetes are concerned.
Why would that be?
Because of the fake sugar and the chemical that it is rather poisonous if it's by itself.
Okay. You want to comment on that?
Yeah, I'm not a big fan of artificial sweeteners, mainly because I don't like the way they taste. And at least I know how sugar is going to be metabolized in the body, and I have no idea what those things are doing. But, yeah, there are flaws. And, you know, what Bloomberg is doing has to choose an easy target, because sweetened soft drinks are sugars and calories and nothing else and there's no nutritional value along with them. But there are lots of other things I would have done too, but I'm not the czar of these things.
Well, you're getting to be.
He is.
I wonder, everybody knocks the soft drinks, especially the ones with sugar, but isn't there something to be said for the fact that you want to drink a lot of fluid in your life, and maybe you don't want to drink water. Maybe water is not what you want to do all the time. And the fact that these drinks taste good is an incentive to drink them.
Yeah, the diet soft drink business is complicated. It does have these chemicals in it, and the FDA says those chemicals are safe and okay, at least at the amounts currently consumed. And I'm not going to get into arguments about that. But what seems very clear is that drinking diet soft drinks has no effect on body weight. In fact, if you want to do bad epidemiology, you can draw a curve of the increase in rates of obesity and the increase in use of artificial sweeteners, and they go up exactly in parallel.
Why?
Because there's a lot of people have hypotheses to explain why that might be. One possibility is that it keeps the taste for sweet in the brain, and so the brain continues to crave those kinds of things, and then you eat more calories to make up for it. I don't know.
You finish the Diet Coke and you go buy
something that makes up for the calories. So I don't know. There's not very much evidence that on a population basis they're helping keep the weight down.
Okay. Joey in Palo Alto.
I don't think they taste good, but that's just me.
Hello?
Hi. Go ahead, Joey.
Oh, hi. Marion, thanks so much for this this book. It's so illuminating. I just wanted to hear your views on this, but let me tell you what I believe. When I go to restaurants, if they have especially lard in like the tortilla chips or butter, I go home and I feel my stomach immediately like swell up like a medium-sized volleyball, and I'm not overweight. okay? And I've worked hard not to be overweight. And it's no thanks to our school system, because I remember, anyway, so that's one thing. I feel it immediately when they use lard and butter in their food, the restaurants. And then I wish there were more restaurants that sold small portions. I always take food home. And my husband is constantly making fun of me in a good way. He's like, we have science projects in the refrigerator. He says it's turning into mold, which it doesn't. But at any rate, the point is, I wish restaurants sold small portions. I don't eat that much because I've taught myself for over the years to eat small portions. And then lastly is teach kids need to learn from grade school and throw in the parents how to eat well. Fine, you have the pyramids, you have that chart. Show me, give me examples in grade school. Okay, you need to eat like an apple and milk and like whole wheat toast with peanut butter and jelly. That's fine. Okay, next lunch and so on, for dinner. I mean, I see that Jamie Oliver and him doing his thing, that guy from the Food Network, and he was here in the Bay Area, I think, a couple of years ago trying to do something with lunch programs here in the public schools in the Sacramento area, here in the Bay Area. And I thought, yay, we need more of that. Because I look around and I try and teach, like, any kid, like child, this stuff, what is it that they put in that? Hydrogenated, blah, blah, blah. You know what I'm talking about.
Oil.
That is, like, so terrible. It's like, you see that on the label, read labels. Do not eat that. Fresh fruit. Anyway, that's all I have to say, those three things. And I'd like to hear Marion comment. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Joey.
I'm overwhelmed. Thanks for your comments.
Okay.
Next.
All right. Oh, it's great. This is a subject people get passionate about.
Well, isn't that wonderful? I consider it a full employment act.
Well, that's good for you. Okay, Joseph in San Francisco. How you doing?
Hi.
Go ahead.
I have my degree in nutrition, my undergraduate degree, and one of the things that I thought was challenging is that people undervalue nutritional science, and there's more of a credence given to fad diets like the South Beach diet, Dr. Atkins, or however it's being recycled currently. And a classic example is Americans' obsession with protein. And I have overweight and obese people telling me that they need more protein all the time when, in fact, Americans eat 3 times more protein than they really need. How do you overcome that attraction to the fad diet versus just the hard science that's sort of been proven? How do you get people to accept that rather than to just sell out to the moneymakers?
That's an interesting question, and she's going to answer it in a second. But the fact that is proven is an interesting word, because I'm not convinced some of this is really proven. But anyway, go ahead, Marion.
Yeah, well, this is a really, I love the question, and it's one I grapple with all the time. And I just want to say one thing about the protein business, because when the My Plate came out, that's the Department of Agriculture's dietary advice to the American people that shows half the plate with fruits and vegetables, roughly a quarter of the plate has protein on it. Protein? Why do they have to push protein? It just doesn't make any sense at all. We don't have any protein deficiency in this country. Everybody has plenty of protein. Probably the average intake of protein in this country is 2 or 3 times the actual requirement for it. So the caller is absolutely right about that. And this is such a deep misunderstanding that even the Department of Agriculture did it. And when I yelled and screamed and said, why'd you put protein in that? When, in fact, 2 of the other sectors of the plate, the grain part and the dairy part, also have protein. They say, well, everybody understands what protein is. Really? I didn't think so. And I didn't think the plate showed that everybody understood what protein is. But the real question is, why is nutrition science so complicated? It is complicated, and it's complicated because humans make just terrible experimental animals. We can't lock humans in cages for 50 years and feed them defined diets and compare one kind of a diet to another. We have to let people go about their daily activities, doing and eating eating and whatever they feel like doing during the period of studies. And so there are always real difficulties in controlling the experiments. There are very, very few well-controlled human experimental trials because they're impossible to control. And so the results of the studies always require interpretation. They're never clearly black or white. They're always kind of gray. And the minute you get into interpretation of studies, you get into the biases of the interpreters.
But doesn't that reflect on what you're trying to say as well?
Well, yes, and we try to say in our book exactly how we're interpreting the science. This is our interpretation of the science. You want to read the original studies, here they are. You can read them and decide for yourself whether you agree with our interpretation or not. I don't see how we can do any better than that. That's the best we can do, given the available research on these topics right now. I happen to find the research fascinating. So I like reading it and like interpreting it and like trying to pull conclusions out of it, particularly the studies that compare one kind of diet to another. These studies cannot possibly control for calorie intake because they're dealing with people who are out in the real world.
Huh, that's interesting. Well, which brings us to you talk in the book, you use the word move. Which is another word for exercise, essentially.
Or activity.
Activity, but even exercising. How important is that in this whole... Can you forget about calories if you exercise enough?
If you run marathons all the time, yes, because you're going to be working off so many of those calories. But for most normal people, working off calories from food is much harder to do than it is to eat less. And the easiest example for that is that if you have one of those 20-ounce sodas that has nearly 300 calories in it, you're going to have to walk an average of about 3 miles in order to work off the calories in that. Physical activity just doesn't burn that many calories unless you're really being enormously active or you're very big and your activity is very intense. And there's much better evidence for the idea that people are eating more now than there is for the fact that they're moving less. It seems intuitively obvious that people are moving less now than they did 20 or 30 years ago.
Go by a gym, all these people are in the gym exercising.
Yeah, but most people are not in gyms. Most people are not in gyms. And there were people in gyms 20 years ago, too. But there's so much evidence that people are eating more. So much evidence from so many different lines of research that you have to ask the question, why are people eating more, and how do we get people not to eat so much if they're worried about their weight? Moving more is very good for health. I'm for it.
Right, and the answer to that question is, how do you get people to eat less? I mean, that's a whole program, but we'll deal with that at some point. Let's talk to Robert in Fairfax. What's going on, Robert?
Yes, hello there. I'm curious to know this. I hope it wasn't already asked in the program, but many people advocate eating what they call the Paleolithic diet. I just heard a program yesterday. A guy wrote a book called Neanderthin, and it kind of makes logical sense to me when I think about the millions of years of evolution that we obviously evolved as hunters and gatherers. And just what do you think of that whole thesis that we'd be healthier eating that sort of a diet?
It'd be kind of uncomfortable to go chasing animals, wouldn't it? I don't know, kind of difficult. I like it in theory. It's a lot of fun to talk about. But I wonder about the basic premises, because one of the big intellectual challenges in the study of diet and health is to figure out what people are eating as opposed to what they say they're eating. And in the case of Paleolithic times, you don't really have anybody that you can ask. So you're totally, you can't watch them or measure what they're eating. So you're kind of dependent on archaeological and other kinds of indirect evidence to figure out what it was that people were eating. And the one part about that makes me kind of a little bit skeptical is that the physical remains of animals last through the centuries much, much better better than the physical remains of plants. It's pretty hard to figure out what the balance was between plant and animal foods in prehistoric times, because plants are destroyed and bones last, and shells last, and other kinds of things last much better. So I think the archaeological scientists are still trying to figure out what the real evidence is.